It involves certain kind of self-reflection. So this notion about digging the well, then of course it can move into a much more complicated understanding that it's possible for transgenerational communication. I think you all have these experiences. Some people say we're dealing dead persons, right? In literature, in philosophy, in art. We are communicating with Kant, who's dead. We're communicating with great writers like James Joyce. He's dead. Shakespeare is dead. And yet, through our reading, we now use the word close reading, not simply superficial reading. We have some communication. And so the idea is that you can have transgenerational dialogues. Now, there are two ways of understanding this. Right now, the prevalent idea is very different from mine. The prevalent idea, using an example, is this is the mountain. This is the most advanced, let's say, in the literary or philosophical sense. This is by far the most important representative of that generation or of that particular period. So it's a pyramid on top of the pyramid. Most of the scholars now want to relate this to the whole mountain range. In a sense, sociologically, what happened to it? Politically, what happened to it? All these things eventually contributed to the development of a great personality. So we have to relate this great personality to all the other people, his friends, his associates, his time, everything. And so this is one way of doing it, the link between mountain peak and the whole mountain range. Now imagine it not just one, but say 5 over a long period of time. Another way of talking about this, there's a dialogue among mountaintops. You look puzzled, but let me say what this means. It means that there's a dialogue between Mozart and Beethoven. Certainly, dialogue between Mozart and many of his predecessors. Mozart is not necessarily interested in all the other composers. Normally, he didn't even talk with them. And yet, he's absolutely seriously about his predecessors, about Bach or the classical musicians. That's true with Beethoven and with others. And there's a communication going on among them. That's true with artists, with literary figures, with philosophers, and so forth. Hegel was involved in his understanding of Kant. Kant tried to understand, say, Hume or Adam Smith. And all of them try to understand Plato and Aristotle, right? This is understandable. A great literary figure we look up to some of the great writers in the past. The person may reach the highest level of his own generation, but he's interested in that. Why we have to understand that? Not that we all became the top of the pyramid. That's not possible because the place is very narrow. Maybe only 1 or 2 people can occupy it. So we hope that would be like that, but normally we probably will fall somewhere else. This is also idea, I just, not in the text, I just want to mention that this idea of going up is an extension of the horizon. If you start with the mountain, base of the mountain, you only see yourself because you cannot find any other way that will be able to help you to go up, right? Because so the Confucians all talk about reflection on things at hand. You have to be realistic where you stand. That's your identity. You try to extend. But if you move up here, then you can see a lot of other people can come up to this stage. Your horizon becomes broader. If you go all the way up here, you know that people can come from many different paths. So you have real comprehensive understanding of the situation is. Right? So this kind of communication is what we're doing. We're not communicating with interpreters of the Confucian tradition alone. we studied Mencius thousands of years ago. We studied Hsueh more than 800 years ago. And we try to understand them. We also try to understand how they transmitted some of the great ideas from one to the other. Is Mencius a good interpreter of Confucius, or Xunzi, another figure? Hsueh, maybe more than 1,000 years later, did he really understand? In what sense he understood it? So this is what we're doing on a daily basis. So it's nothing mysterious. We do that. I think one distinctive feature of the Confucian tradition is that we do that from our own particular point of view. Normally, in science and also in other social sciences, the first class is to ask you to try to be disinterested, not uninterested. You're very interested, but you have to be disinterested, which means your ability to detach yourself from the object of study, and you try to minimize your subjective ideas. Sometimes your subjective ideas, your experience, your personal history, all these things are irrelevant. That's true with studying all the natural sciences, but even in social sciences, to a certain extent humanities. But it's a bit difficult to do it in humanities. Because when you study a text or you study music, you try to understand it, there's a personal investment. And without personal investment, you're not going to enter into the world. And so this idea of involvement. Earlier, I made a very clear distinction between private and personal. So the personal involved is not that you try to develop certain kind of private understanding. If you do private, involving private understanding, you're not going to write a paper, because the paper will have to be read by someone else. So you can write a diary, you can express all your ideas about someone, you don't want to show to anyone. That's your private affair. If it's personal, you feel very intense, you feel very much involved, but you're willing to have your personal or existential understanding be discussed, debated, falsified,